Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I think you guys will enjoy if you have similar taste in music as me. And today I have a pretty significant artist to talk about, one that I'm sure most of you already know and are familiar with. This is a legend in the progressive rock game. This is Jon Anderson and his latest release with the Band Geeks. The album is called True. Jon Anderson, of course, was an integral member from the very beginning of the band Yes, and was with them through most of their career, of course with them on their seminal 70s prog albums, also a big part of the Trevor Rabin era and into the 90s as well. Unfortunately, kind of parted ways with the band back in the 2000s after Magnification, but has been doing his own solo stuff a little bit here and there when he's been able to. There's been a lot of promises of different Jon Anderson releases, some that have come out, some that haven't, some that people are still waiting for. He has basically two full solo albums since his departure from Yes, 2011 Survival and Other Stories, and then 1,000 Hands, Chapter 1. So those were his last two proper solo albums. Another notable release, at least from my perspective, was his release with Royna Stolt, the Stolt-Anderson project, so to speak, which came out in 2016 called The Invention of Knowledge. Fantastic record, in my opinion, brings to the table a lot of Royna Stolt's tendencies, but with Jon Anderson fronting all this music that sounds very much in line with classic Yes, I just really thought it was a cool release. And hopefully there's a part 2 on the way that they've been teasing and talking about for quite some time. So, but this album in particular, he's joined up with a backing group called the Band Geeks, who he's been touring with, who got their fame by doing some notable Yes covers. And so they're very well versed in Yes music and are just excellent musicians and bring a ton of stuff to the table here. And I know there's inevitably going to be a lot of comparisons to Yes proper and their latest releases, The Quest and Mirror to the Sky, and a question of, is Jon Anderson doing stuff that's more in line with classic Yes than Yes itself is doing at this time? And I don't want to get into comparisons and back and forths about who has the best Yes material. I think it's great that we're getting multiple Yes style material from different groups and different iterations. And I liked Mirror to the Sky. I thought it was a really great album from the current lineup of Yes. But this album is an excellent album as well and really harkens back to the classic eras of Yes. In fact, to me, this sounds like an amalgamation of all of the different eras of Yes through the years. I think there's a lot of early 70s DNA, but even more so, you get some of that 80s Trevor Rabin style in certain tracks. And then even more present is the kind of 90s revival era, Keys of Ascension, The Ladder. I think there's a bit of that aesthetic throughout this release as well. But it's really impressive from Jon Anderson, who himself is approaching 80 years old, that he still has that singular tone that he's known for, has that positive spirit that he brought to Yes. It's all over this release and through the lyrics. I just think he's a wonderful person, a great personality, and brings a lot to the table just through his persona and his spiritual vibe and the things that he cares about and that comes out through his music. And yeah, you could argue that maybe in spots and patches his voice isn't as strong as it once was, like in his classic heyday. But considering his age and considering his history in recent years, I think it's really remarkable how well his voice holds up and how it still sounds like classic Jon Anderson. I just am really impressed, and I think this is a really excellent release that anyone who's a fan of Jon Anderson and Yes in general should check out and enjoy. And you could have your quibbles and you could say, it's not quite up to the snuff of classic Yes, it's not close to the edge, it's not, Awaken or that kind of thing. But in today's world, I think it's the closest you're going to get to that classic Yes sound. And it's a true wonder to behold and has so much great material. And the Band Geeks, not to bury the lead, the Band Geeks also bring a lot to the table musically. They're incredible musicians that have a vibrancy that really works for this release. And I think maybe that's what sets this album apart a little bit from Yes itself proper, that this is a younger group of musicians who feel like they have a lot of energy and a lot that they're trying to prove. And maybe some of the other Yes members are a bit older at this point, a bit more laid back in their approach and maybe don't have that same fire that some of these musicians are bringing to these tracks, which I think adds a lot to the sound. True Messenger begins the album. It was one of the singles that came out ahead of time. Of course, you get that bright Yes style 12-string acoustic guitar in the opening with Anderson's unique vocal. The band comes in with some pleasant Squire-like bass and Hammond organ with layered vocals. You get a cool mixture, like I said, of the different eras of Yes. Definitely has that 70s classic vibe, but I feel like it's mixed in with some 80s, early 90s Trevor Rabin, maybe bits of talk era of Yes. I think as the song progresses, has a wonderful life and vibrancy to this sound. I think it's just a beautiful opener that showcases what you should come to expect from the record. Shine On is a bit more of the poppier single that came out to showcase the album. Big expansive layered harmonies at the beginning, reminding me of like Rhythm of Love from Big Generator, that sort of era of the band. You get a funky bass line and driving rhythm. And I just love this kind of nod to 80s style Trevor Rabin, Yes, and I think it's really fun and has a poppy sensibility, but doesn't sacrifice the true Yes-isms that you come to know from the band. Really beautiful track. But then we get into kind of a mini epic called Counties and Countries, which has a great instrumental opening with some acoustic guitar, leading to some high-octane workouts with some triumphant sounding, almost classical influence in the keyboard work. There's some acoustic guitar and vocals that come in as the band continues to swirl around this main focus of Jon Anderson. A very majestic and sweeping piece with some classical keyboard textures, and Anderson sounding a bit gentler and sweeter in the vocals, maybe partially because he can't belt it out anymore due to his age, but I think it's really nicely textured vocals and recorded really well and fits within the theme of this piece. There's a great uplifting guitar solo that really impresses me, getting into some cool Hammond organ bits, and I love these moments in these tracks. Of course, the focus is on Jon Anderson and his vocals and what he's written and brought to the table here, but I think he allows for the band to shine in different respects throughout the piece. And I think that is kind of what sets it apart from maybe that Anderson Stolt project, where it just felt like it was all Anderson all the time. He was singing over pretty much the entire release, where at least in this release, you get moments of cool instrumental breaks where the band gets to showcase their chops and their abilities and brings a lot more variety and a lot more interest and adding a lot of textures to the music. I think it's really effective. Build Me an Ocean is a pleasant piano ballad with some nylon and steel guitars and backing harmonies, orchestral textures, kind of a little bit of a breather before we get into Still a Friend, which is a cool, funky track, kind of harkening back to the Ladder in their sound. I think this track features some of Jon Anderson's best vocals on the album, some really cool instrumental sections, some great driving bass, some great keyboard soloing, and slide guitar magic at points in the track. This is a secretly really awesome track, one of my favorites on the record. It's a great way to squeeze a lot of what Yes is all about into a shorter track, considering the lengths of the other tracks around it. Make It Right and Realization Part 2 are kind of a 1-2 punch that bring a bit more of a classical sounding style to the sound. Think of these classical acoustic guitars like you'd hear on Turn of the Century from Going for the One. You get some additions of church organ and choirs, bringing a bit of a spiritual bent to this track as you get these kind of choir vocals and Anderson singing in his sweet style. The second part of the track, Realization, Part 2, adds some driving acoustic guitar and shuffling drums and a bouncy fretless bass, and you get kind of an uplifting world music feel. I think this is most in line with his other solo works that he's done in the past, but brilliantly realized, and I think it's a great track to provide a little bit of a breather behind some of these bigger, more expansive prog tracks. And speaking of bigger, more expansive prog tracks, we get the big epic next called Once Upon a Dream, and it feels like this track really brings together all these different elements of Yes from throughout the years. You hear a bit of a Close to the Edge kind of sound to it, you hear a bit of that Awaken kind of majesty and build-ups, you hear a bit of like Endless Dream from the Talk era, some The Ladder stuff, really cool to bring all these different eras, maybe even a bit of magnification and some of the orchestral, more majestic moments as well. You get some atmospheric keys and tinkling bells to start with Anderson's vocals and added harmonies and almost chant-like feel, not unlike Revealing Science of God's beginning as well. Sometimes the backing vocals almost remind me of Chris Squire and Steve Howe's vocals, which I think is an iconic trio of vocalists who did a lot of great harmonies back in the classic Yes period, and I think they're trying to bring that to the forefront here. And you get some great Squire-style bouncing bass, some majestic keys, some almost funky guitar lines. It has a cool driving feel as the song proceeds, until we get a bit of a break in a more angelic section with great vocals and slide guitar, some acoustic strumming, kind of like you'd expect from like Close to the Edge, where you get this kind of lighter, more atmospheric section before we ramp back up to the rousing finale of the track. We even get some like church organ soloing as the band ramp backs up, and we get almost a power ballad feel to end the album with this really great epic guitar solo and leading out those chanting vocals once again. So it's a fantastic piece of music, one of the best recent epics from the Yes family, I would say, and really harkens back to the classics and brings a bit more of a new edge as well. So a really fantastic track, and probably the big highlight of the whole release for me at least. And then we get a short kind of ballad to end the record, Thank God, which I believe is a bit of a ode to Jon Anderson's wife. Nothing too special here, but a very pleasant sound and a nice little breather to end the album with. So a fantastic record from Jon Anderson. I think he knocked it out of the park. Hope that he does more with the Band Geeks. They've been on tour and just killing it, doing all kinds of classic Yes material, and I would love to hear more of the band doing originals like this album. I think it showcases that there's still something in the tank with Jon Anderson, and that he still has a lot to prove and to bring into the musical genre. It's always fun to hear one of your musical heroes kind of come back and produce something that's really brilliant and that takes the best of classic prog and fuses it with a bit of modern prog aesthetic and brings you something that just sounds very satisfying and pleasing. And if you're a Yes fan, this is a no-brainer. If you're a Jon Anderson fan, this is a no-brainer. It should be one that you really cherish and appreciate. Maybe don't believe the hyperbole of like, this is like the best classic Yes since Going for the One or something like that. I don't know if I'd go quite that far. I think it's in line with a lot of the best of the material from the 90s era, from Keys to Ascension, from The Ladder. You know, I think it's some of the best Yes-related material since Magnification, in fact. But, you know, don't think this is some revolutionary album that's going to, like, reignite the 70s Yes classics. I think it's a really solid release and showcases what the band can do in a more modern take. And I hope that Jon Anderson proceeds and continues to do great material. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you appreciated this review. And please check out the album and let me know in the comments what you think about this album. I'm sure many of you have already heard it as well. So thank you guys, and I'll catch you hopefully in a future episode. Bye everybody. Enjoy the music.